I'd like to use this opportunity to talk about Franz Kafka, one of my favorite writers. The reason he has been on my mind is that his work, The Trial, and the case of Pavel Durov in France, has, let's say, eerie parallels, both metaphorically and literally. Of course, The Trial is a work of fiction, but I think it is often useful to go to the surreal world of literature, even of the over-the-top dystopian variety, like 1984, Animal Farm, Brave New World, The Trial, The Castle, Metamorphosis, even The Plague by Albert Camus, all to better understand our real world and the destructive paths we have the potential to go down together, which also hopefully helps us understand how to avoid doing so. So let me zoom out and speak about Franz Kafka. Who was he? He was an insurance clerk who wrote at night. He died young and almost completely unknown, and he asked for his manuscripts to be burned. Luckily for us, his friend Max Brod refused to do so, giving us the work of what I consider to be one of 20th century's greatest writers. In his work, Kafka wrote about the cold, machine-like reduction of humans to case files through the labyrinth of institutional power. He wrote about an individual's feeling of guilt even when a crime has not been committed. Or, more generally, he wrote about the feeling of anxiety that is part of the human condition in our modern, chaotic world. His writing style was to use short, declarative sentences to describe the surreal and the absurd, and in so doing, effectively, I think, convey the feeling of an experience versus simply describing the experience. For example, famously, his work, The Metamorphosis, opens with the following lines. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. He was lying in his hard armor-plated back, and when he lifted his head a little, he could see his dome-like brown belly divided into stiff, arched segments, on top of which the bed quilt could hardly keep in position and was about to slide off completely. His numerous legs, which were pitifully thin compared to the rest of his bulk, waved helplessly before his eyes. Kafka, I think, effectively uses this image of being transformed into a giant bug stuck on his back to convey a feeling of helplessness and uselessness to his family, to his job, to society. The feeling of being a burden to everyone, dehumanized, alienated, and abandoned. The feeling of being only temporarily valued as long as he served some function for his job or for his family, and quickly discarded otherwise. I will probably talk about this work in more depth at another time because it is so haunting, and I think it is such a profound description of the burden of existence in modern society for many people. But here, let me talk about another of his work, The Trial. In this novel, the main character, Joseph K., is a successful bank officer, and he's arrested on his birthday for an unspecified crime by a kind of amorphous court whose authority is everywhere and nowhere. He navigates a labyrinth-like legal system where everyone knows about his case, but no one can really explain it. The so-called trial never actually occurs in any conventional sense. Instead, Joseph K.'s entire life becomes the proceedings leading up to the trial. In a sense, the trial is the state of being accused itself, a permanent condition rather than a singular event. Kafka's genius in this work was to show that modern institutions don't need to hold trials. They just need to hold you in the permanent looming possibility of one. Public attention to this case, both positive and negative, gives Joseph K. a feeling of constantly being judged by people around him. This wears at his mind, and his psychological well-being begins to deteriorate. In a sense, the trial doesn't need to convict him. The internal psychological turmoil and the external social scrutiny performs the conviction and the eventual execution. When exactly 1 year after his arrest, Joseph K. is visited by two men who walk him courteously through the city to an abandoned quarry and stab him in the heart without Joseph K. resisting. To me, the trial shows that tyranny's final victory isn't when it kills you, but when you hold still for the knife, not because you're forced, but because you've been exhausted into submission. Once again, it is a haunting story of the soullessness of bureaucracy in its suffocation of the human spirit. I highly recommend this short book, and I'll probably talk about it even more in the future. I don't think it's especially useful for me to speak to any parallels between the trial and Pavel Durov's case, because after all, the trial is a work of fiction. But on a positive note, let me report that as far as I saw, Pavel has maintained optimism and a general positive outlook throughout this whole process. What I always fear in such cases is that a bureaucratic system can wear people down, exhaust them into surrendering. I saw none of that with Pavel. I don't think he knows how to give up or give in, no matter how much pressure he's under. Again, this is truly inspiring to me. Also, now that we're talking about it, let me mention some other of Kafka's work that was moving to me. The Castle has similar description as the trial does of the absurd inaccessibility of those in authority, of the nightmarish bureaucracy. The character in The Castle is also named K. Both bureaucracies operate through exhaustion, endless deferrals, procedures, waiting rooms. Again, highly relevant to modern times. I can also highly recommend Kafka's In the Penal Colony and Hunger Artist. Both are too interesting and weird to explain in depth here. But let me say The Hunger Artist is a story that I think is relevant to our modern day attention economy, where so many people want to be famous. It tells the story of, let's say, professional faster who performs starvation in a cage as entertainment. And he slowly loses his audience to newer spectacles, so much so that eventually when he starves himself to death, nobody cares. Kafka's work is heavy. It serves as a warning for the nightmare that civilization can become. And yet, I think it is also a source of optimism. Because when we can recognize elements of our own world in Kafka's stories, when we can see elements of our institutions in the trial or in the castle, when we can see ourselves in Gregor Samsa, we're not just diagnosing the disease. We're proving that we're still human and wise enough to see it and name it. Kafka gave us the goal to resist against such systems that try to dehumanize us and to ensure that individual freedom and the human spirit keep flourishing. I think it will. I have faith in us humans. I love you all.